Let me ask you a simple question. In your personal opinion, are Hindus endangered in Bangladesh, whether it is for communal reasons or political reasons? I'm leaving the motivation aside, but are Hindus endangered in Bangladesh? Has the wider mood of the country turned anti Hindu? Or are Hindus still considered an integral part of Bangladesh?
Hindus are considered very much an integral part of Bangladesh. And however, what is happening now is that India is not perceived to be pro-Bangladesh. And this is where the problem is. And the reason is that India has done very little to forge relationship with Bangladesh or the interim government or its people. India's relationship seems to be still focused with its relationship with Sheikh Hasina, the fallen regime. And she's being widely covered by Indian media. Her comments on genocide, that too coming from a person who has perpetrated possibly 3 genocides during her time. So I think that is the perception. It's not at all anti-Hindu, but we are upset with the manner in which the narratives are coming out of India. So it's more to do with India than anti-Hindu.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Are India-Bangladesh relations in free fall? After India repeatedly expressed concern about what it calls multiple attacks on Hindus, Bangladesh's chief advisor Muhammad Yunus called for unity in the face of what he calls Indian aggression. Meanwhile, Sheikh Hasina has accused the Bangladesh government of Muhammad Yunus of genocide. On top of all of this, there are reports that Bangladesh's Attorney General wants secularism deleted from the country's constitution. So what should we make of all these developments? Joining me from Dhaka is a high-profile advocate from the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, Rashna Imam. Rashna Imam, the Indian government has repeatedly expressed its concern about what it calls multiple attacks on Hindus by extremist elements in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has gone so far as to call it genocide. In response, Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus has called upon Bangladesh political parties to unite in the face of what he's called Indian aggression. How do you view the situation, the relationship between India and Bangladesh, which seems to be fast developing and heading south?
Thank you very much, Karan, for having me on the show. I'll start by giving a little bit of context to the comment in particular made by the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. See, she is allegedly perpetrator of 2 mass murders, and for sure, one mass murder that actually led to the uprising that led to her ouster. So coming from her, credibility of what she says is something that should not be attached a lot of importance to. But and also to just the tip of the iceberg, the last 3 elections under her were heavily rigged and questionable, to say the least. So she has been trying to destabilize the Bangladesh government since its ouster. Unfortunately, what we see from the narratives coming from India is that India is taking the bait. And this is what is concerning for Bangladesh. A lot of the concerns that we see that has been raised through some of the Indian media outlets or the Indian government for that matter, we believe is completely unwarranted and baseless. It's not just unwarranted and baseless, but also little to do with ground reality. So just to break it down a little bit more, why I say it's baseless or unwarranted, right after the ouster, post 5th of August, when there was no government in place, there was looting, there was vandalism, but most of these, if not all, were not for religious reasons. These were primarily for political reasons. You have to understand that during the 15 years of Sheikh Hasina's regime, she had politicized everything, and that includes the committees in mosques and temples. So a lot of the aggression was not really on the basis of religion, but rather because of political affiliation with the fallen regime. And the lootings and the vandalisms to an extent continued for a month or so. from the statistics that that are available to us. But beyond that, especially now, the situation was completely under control up until the arrest of Chinmoy Das.
Can I interrupt at that point? Before we come to the arrest of Chinmoy Krishna Dar, Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus has recently called this Indian aggression. Do you agree with that term, Indian aggression?
I believe there is a context to that. He called it Indian aggression in light of the narratives that were coming out, not just from some, if not most of the Indian media outlets, but also the Indian government. I mean, some of the titles to the news shows that were coming out of India: is Bangladesh becoming an Afghanistan? Is Bangladesh becoming an Islamic state? Hindus are being persecuted. Minorities are being persecuted, which again had nothing to do with reality. And a lot of this was based on fake news. I mean, there is an organization, an independent organization called Rumor Scanner in Bangladesh, which I believe was certified by the International Fact-Checking Organization as well, which has sort of flagged out that a lot of these items were fake news, which was circulating in the Indian media, and also statements made by the Indian government as well.
So is the relationship now pretty close to rock bottom?
I wouldn't say it's pretty close to rock bottom, especially given that foreign secretary level talks I know are forthcoming on the 9th and 10th of December. So there is still scope. And in particular, the way the interim government has handled it, I think it's commendable. Because
let me point this out to you. Very recently, the Bangladesh Deputy High Commissioner in Agartala, that's on the Indian side of the border, in the capital of Tripura, was vandalized. Hospitals in Kolkata and Tripura have announced they will not treat Bangladeshi patients. On your side of the border, the Indian Cultural Center in Dhaka was attacked and badly damaged, and Mamata Banerjee has now called for United Nations peacekeeping troops to be deployed in Bangladesh. Do you believe that the relationship is deteriorating? Even if it hasn't reached rock bottom, is it steadily slipping southwards?
Well, the answer to Mamata Banerjee's invitation for the United Nations peacekeeping mission to be here has already been provided by the Indian politician Shashi Tharoor, so I won't go into that. With regard to the Indian Cultural Center, it is important to realize that this attack took place on the 5th of August. At that point, that is the day of the ouster. That is the day Sheikh Hasina fled the country and there was no government in place. Whereas the attack on Bangladesh Deputy High Commission in Agartala took place under the very nose of a stable Indian government, in presence of police. And that sends out the wrong message. That sends out the message that the orders must have come from the top. And I think these are issues that we need to address through diplomacy.
Can I interrupt and ask, is that how the attack on the Deputy High Commissioner in Agartala has been interpreted in Dhaka? That orders must have come from the top, meaning from presumably the Modi government?
Quite a few quarters are unfortunately looking at it that way, but you cannot blame them given that the police was present and didn't do anything to control the situation. This is the reason why this is being perceived as the orders having come from the very top, which is unfortunate. And I'm repeating again, I think this can easily be resolved through diplomatic
we'll come to diplomatic resolutions in a moment's time, but let me first put this to you. The Indian position, which is repeated quite frequently by spokesmen of the Ministry of External Affairs, is that Bangladesh is in denial, that attacks on Hindus, their temples and properties are continuing, and worse, they're escalating. Bangladesh says this is propaganda, and India is spreading, and I'm quoting Muhammad Yunus, fictitious stories and undermining our efforts to build a new Bangladesh. You are in Dhaka, you are there on the ground. What is reality like as you see it?
The reality, Karan, is far from the narrative that is coming out from India. I mean, I can say, I can at least vouch for the greater Dhaka city, and there's not been any notable attack on minorities in the greater Dhaka city, or for that matter, anywhere in Bangladesh that is major in any way. And one more thing, related just after the arrest of Chinmoy Das, a public prosecutor was brutally hacked to death by followers of Chinmoy Dash in Chittagong. And Chittagong is one of the most religious, you could say, districts in Bangladesh. And there were lakhs of people present in the janaza of that particular advocate. Despite that, there was no communal violence whatsoever. Everything happened very, very peacefully. And this is not being reported. If we were sort of heading down that path, certainly some violence was expected in a janaza that attracted thousands of people.
So you're saying to me that the reportage in India and the comments made by the Indian government, particularly by a spokesman on behalf of the Ministry of External Affairs, are selectively choosing facts. They are exaggerating. They are making it seem as if the violence that occurred in August when Sheikh Hasina fled the country has continued and escalated since then. You're saying that is not the case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not just selectively choosing, at times spreading misinformation without fact checking. For example, only the other day, I came across a piece of news that had pictures up on the screen that a lawyer of Chinmoy Dash has been badly beaten up and hospitalized. And this was completely a fake piece of news. He was the guy who was touted to be the lawyer, Ramon Roy, is not even Chinmoy Dash's lawyer. So again, before fact checking, spreading something like this is very dangerous. And if anything, this may actually lead to communal riots instead of what is happening in Bangladesh.
Now, Professor Yunus's government believes, and you echoed this in your answers as well yourself, that the attacks on Hindus that have taken place are not religious in motivation but political. Clearly, you agree with that because you said that yourself a moment ago. But what I want to put to you is this: from the point of view of the victim, is there any meaningful difference?
No, unfortunately, from the point of view of the victim, there is no meaningful difference, but it does make a difference so far as the Hindu population is concerned in Bangladesh. The perception that Hindus are under attack does make a difference to them.
But if Hindus are being attacked for political reasons, they are under attack. The motivation may differ. It may not be communal, it may be political, but Hindus are still under attack because they are the ones getting attacked. That's the point the Indian government's making.
No, I think the Indian government is also exaggerating the numbers. It's not just Hindus, it's basically Awami Leaguers were being attacked after the ouster of the government, and that continued for about a month. And after that, the numbers have significantly gone down, and the law and order situation is under control because now that we have a government in place and we have police on the ground. There was also a period of time right after ouster when police was not on the ground. The reason being that the police was weaponized by the previous
in the last
regime.
10 days, and I apologize for interrupting you, but we believe in India, and I'm quoting comments made by the spokesman of the Ministry of External Affairs, that temples in the Chittagong area have been attacked. At least 2, possibly 3.
Again, these are information that has to be fact checked before it is widely covered and
incorrect?
spread.
Are you saying it's incorrect?
I have not done the fact checking myself. However, a lot of information spread in the Indian media has been incorrect so far. So if that pattern is still ongoing, then these raise questions. And also right after the situation escalated, after the arrest of Chinmoy Das, the interim government actually has gone all out. They have sat with the political parties, they have sat with the religious leaders of different religions, and they have also extended an invitation to the Indian government to send journalists down to Bangladesh to assess the ground situation and then report, as opposed to spreading misinformation.
Let me ask you this. You're a trained lawyer. You are in Bangladesh. You are observing and watching and double checking. Let me ask you a simple question. In your personal opinion, are Hindus endangered in Bangladesh, whether it is for communal reasons or political reasons? I'm leaving the motivation aside, but are Hindus endangered in Bangladesh? Has the wider mood of the country turned anti-Hindu? Or are Hindus still considered an integral part of Bangladesh?
Hindus are considered very much an integral part of Bangladesh. And however, what is happening now is that India is not perceived to be pro-Bangladesh. And this is where the problem is. And the reason is that India has done very little to forge relationship with Bangladesh or the interim government or its people. India's relationship seems to be still focused with its relationship with Sheikh Hasina, the fallen regime. And she's being widely covered by Indian media. Her comments on genocide, that too coming from a person who has perpetrated possibly 3 genocides during her time. So I think that is the perception. It's not at all anti-Hindu, but we are upset with the manner in which the narratives are coming out of India. So it's more to do with India than anti-Hindu.
But is it resulting in Hindus in Bangladesh being targeted as a result? Are they
Now,
seen as proxies for, as fifth columnists of India?
not at all. That is not the impression that I'm getting from the ground at all.
For many in India, the flashpoint was, and you mentioned this yourself a moment ago, the recent arrest on grounds of sedition of Chinmoy Krishna Das, the former ISKCON priest. Now, lawyers are refusing to defend him, something the United States State Department has itself commented on adversely. But all he's accused of is disrespect to the Bangladeshi flag. Has this case been mishandled in Dhaka? Have they used a sledgehammer where perhaps a fly swatter would have been more appropriate?
About the charges brought against him, again, I believe formal charges have not yet been brought. He has been arrested on the ground of sedition, which is 124A of the Penal Code. And if you see the language of the section, it's basically brings or attempts to bring into hatred or contempt, or excites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government established by the law, so on and so forth.
Yes,
and,
but all he did was to raise a saffron flag allegedly higher than the Bangladesh flag. To interpret that as sedition surely is a bit exaggerated.
I'd like to make 2 points to address your question here. The first one would be, if eventually after investigation this is found to be without any substance, the charges are going to be dismissed. The case against him is going to be dismissed. So it's before the judiciary now, one. And the second one is that so far as mishandling the situation is concerned, see, right after the ouster of the government, the law enforcement in particular has been quite, one might say, sensitive in view of the slightly compromised law and order situation that happens in the aftermath of any uprising or ouster anywhere in the world. And comparatively, if we were to draw parallels with things that have happened in India or otherwise, this is nothing compared to that. So given that, I believe the law enforcement may have erred on the side of caution. And that is how I am looking at the situation. And
erred on the side of caution or erred on the side of exaggeration?
Erred on the side of caution, I would say. So far as legal representation is concerned, again, he has not been denied legal representation.
No, but lawyers are refusing to defend him.
I just checked actually a few days back, and he has legal representation. I believe his lawyer is called Reagan.
The case was postponed because there was no lawyer there to defend him. That is what your own judge said when the case came up a couple of days ago. And the United States State Department, I believe the US spokesman was Vedant Patel, commented adversely about this.
And this was right in the aftermath of a public prosecutor being brutally hacked to death by the followers of Chinmoy Das. So you can understand why at that point of time he may not have had legal representation. But that state of affair is not continuing. He has legal representation, I have been told. And of course, it's before the court now. If there is no substance to the sedition charges against him, it is going to be dropped, or the case is going to be dismissed.
I know, if
this has been blown out of proportion.
If there is no substance to the sedition charge against him, the case will be dropped. It must be dropped. It has to be dropped. It would be wrong if it wasn't. But he would have been put through the process of punishment nonetheless. And it will turn out that he's been put through that process wrongly.
No, punishment would come after trial.
No, the punishment.
So he would definitely not be punished.
I'm saying the process is the punishment, and he's been put through that wrongly if he turns out to be innocent.
If he has been charged wrongly, So there is a big if there, because I just read out the sedition section
Yes,
of
but
the
that
penal
surely
code. So
doesn't
if he's been
cover.
charged wrongly, then of course it's going to be dropped.
But
And
you're a excellent lawyer and I am not. But surely sedition doesn't extend to disrespect of the flag, particularly if that disrespect was in the shape and form of raising a saffron flag higher than the Bangladeshi flag. As I said, sedition is a sledgehammer where a fly swatter would do.
I am not honestly trying to argue the case against Chinmoy Dash here, but having said that, the context in which the flag was disrespected again leaves a lot to be desired. As
Okay.
we know, since ouster, because of the narratives coming out of India, there is a tension between the two countries, and there is an sort of a repeated attempt on the part of Sheikh Hasina through comments, unwarranted comments like genocide taking place, to incite communal violence. So if you look at the broader context, then Chinmoy Das's intention leaves a lot to be desired as to why he would do such a thing in the context of what has been going on till now.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let's come to something else that's drawn a lot of attention. And this time, again, it links up with the mood and feelings of the Hindu community in your country. I'm talking about comments made by your Attorney General that secularism cannot be part of the Bangladesh constitution because he says Bangladesh is a Muslim majority country. Is that the view of the interim government as well? I ask because he is, after all, their Attorney General. Is Bangladesh thinking of moving away from secularism? Because if it were, that would create an atmosphere that would fill the Hindu community with apprehension, if not fear.
Thank you for that question, because I think this really needs to be conveyed to our neighboring country. If I were to start with a little bit of history, secularism was there in the Constitution of Bangladesh from the very beginning, which is 1972, when we adopted the Constitution right after the independence of Bangladesh. This is not just there, it is one of the four foundational pillars of the Constitution. And the context in which the Attorney General made this comment, again, 15th Amendment to the Constitution abolished non-party caretaker government under which elections would take place. And this is why post-ouster, the 15th Amendment has been challenged, as there's a broad consensus that the caretaker government has to be brought back to oversee elections or transition of power. And one of the things in the 15th Amendment is secularism. And it was in that context, there was a passing submission, a passing remark during the course of the hearing by the Attorney General in the court. I have actually double-checked with my colleagues who were present in court that day. There were no elaborate submissions about dropping secularism. In fact, I've heard so much that the word secularism was not even there. I think the idea was to put in the words absolute faith and trust in Almighty Allah, which one can argue by necessary implication would replace secularism, but that is all there was. And
can I just interrupt? Are you therefore saying that reports, which have got a lot of credence and a lot of attention in India, that the Attorney General was suggesting to the Bangladesh court that secularism should be dropped from the constitution because Bangladesh is a Muslim majority country, that those reports are inaccurate and wrong? Is that what you're saying?
Those reports are definitely exaggerated and to an extent inaccurate, because it is not eventually even the High Court division, let alone the Attorney General, that will decide or seal the fate of secularism in the Constitution. I mean, there is the High Court division, and then there is the apex court, the appellate division. And after that, whichever body, be it Parliament or a constituent assembly, that will carry out constitutional reform. So there are 3 more stages left to decide the fate of secularism, and this is not even being
that
debated.
I understand. I understand that the lower court can't decide the fate of secularism, but the process could start at the lower court level. Let me ask you, what exactly do you believe your Attorney General said? Because he's the source of the confusion. What do you believe he said?
As I said earlier, I've heard from colleagues who were present in the court. He said that we should insert trust and faith in Almighty Allah, which by necessary implication may replace the word secularism in the Constitution.
Is it only by
implication?
Is it only by implication, or did he actually specifically say that secularism should be deleted because Bangladesh is a Muslim majority country? The first is an interpretation. The second, if he did say it, is an actual fact. So did he actually say secularism should be deleted?
The fact gathering that I have done, he actually said, he did not actually say secularism should be dropped. He actually said all trust and faith in Almighty Allah should be inserted in the Constitution. Now, coming to that, why I think this is of no consequence, especially not of the level of importance that is being attached to this by the narratives coming out of India, is because there are far more superior constitutional safeguards in the Constitution of Bangladesh to safeguard secularism. For example, even if secularism were to be dropped, the word secularism or the provisions that contain the word secularism from the Constitution, we have 2 fundamental rights in the Constitution, which is Article 28, which says you cannot discriminate on the basis of religion, and there is Article 41, which guarantees freedom of religion. You can profess or practice any religion, and these are actually fundamental rights, and that itself means that these are judicially enforceable. Whereas the other provisions with the word secularism in them is not even judicially enforceable. So there are far more superior constitutional safeguards, and the framework is completely secular. So I think it's impossible almost that secular, even if the word is dropped, we're going to turn into an Islamic state, and secularism is the only word that is sort of the gatekeeper, acting as a gatekeeper here. That's a completely wrong interpretation of what has happened.
So you're saying to me that even if the Attorney General did say secularism should be dropped, which anyway you've questioned because your report suggests he didn't even mention the word secularism, but even if he did say secularism should be dropped, that would not be the end of the concept of secularism in Bangladesh, because articles that you cited, I think they were Article 26 and 41,
28 and 41.
Articles 28 and 41 enforce the fundamental right of freedom of religion and freedom of worship and the right not to be discriminated on those grounds. Therefore, secularism, you're saying, is entrenched in the Bangladesh Constitution, regardless of whether that word secularism is there or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, let me come to another thing picked up by the Times of India in India on Wednesday. Apparently, Chief Advisor Yunus said, and I'm quoting the Times of India, that he's issued an invitation to Indian journalists to investigate allegations about persecution of Hindus and report the reality. But as you yourself have been repeatedly saying in this interview, and as Zafar Soban, the editor of the Dhaka Tribune, said to me literally last week, you people believe that the Indian media is biased, and it refuses to recognize the situation has improved compared to August and September and not deteriorated. The Indian media is making it seem as if the situation has deteriorated. You're saying it's improved very considerably since August and September. In which case, if that is how the Indian media is viewed, what purpose would be served by Mr. Yunus inviting the media to come and see for themselves?
I think first and foremost, extending such an invitation goes to show the bona fide of the interim government. If the interim government had anything to hide, they clearly would not have opened up Bangladesh to Indian journalists. That's the first point I'd like to make. The second one is that obviously we realize that not all is bad in the Indian media, or not all journalists are compromised in the Indian media or serving a particular agenda. So we still have faith in a lot of media platforms in India. So that probably is one more reason. And you know what is actually surprising and shocking is that the narratives coming out is trying to make the interim government sound non-secular. Why I say it's shocking is because if you look at the composition of the interim government, a lot of the advisors were actually human rights activists who were persecuted by the previous regime for that very thing. So they may be accused of many things, but non-secular they're not. That's for sure.
Let me end this interview by putting a simple question to you. I've heard you, and the audience watching this interview will have repeatedly heard you say that the reports in the Indian media, the narrative put out by the Indian government is not just exaggerated, it's wrong. It fails to recognize that the situation has improved very considerably compared to what it was in August, September. The narrative instead makes it seem as if the violence, the looting, the arson that the Hindu community suffered in August continues and is getting worse. You're saying all of that is wrong. But what is also apparent to us in India is that Bangladeshi Hindus are still fearful. Whether it's talk of making Bangladesh a Muslim majority country, or whether it's talk about secularism, as we've discussed in the hands of the Attorney General, all of this has worried them, it's made them fearful. And my question is a simple one. Have attempts been made by civil society, by people like yourself, to reach out to Bangladeshi Hindus, 8% of your country, your fellow citizens, to reassure them? Have attempts been made to reassure them and say, look, you're needlessly worried, you're needlessly scared, you're one of us, you're as dear to this country as anyone else? Has an attempt been made by civil society to reach out to them?
Yes, Karan, many attempts have been made, not just by the interim government, who I said the chief advisors sat with the heads of the religious communities, but they're being invited to talk shows. So attempts have been made by the media to voice whatever their concerns are. And you would be surprised, a lot of the religious leaders have actually taken a stand against the narratives coming out of India. So, which is quite surprising. And they have actually taken the stand that is not reflective of what is happening, and it is that the fear mongering, and they're sort of construing the narratives coming out of India as fear mongering. So whatever fear may be there in the minds of the Hindu population in Bangladesh, I believe for most part, the Indian media narratives are responsible for that,
and you're
as opposed
saying,
to what is happening here. And
when you speak about religious leaders challenging the Indian narrative, you're talking of Hindu religious leaders in Bangladesh.
Yes, Hindu Mahajat leaders. I have actually watched a number of talk shows with, I think, the Secretary General of the Hindu Mahajat, who made this statement. That there is no persecution, and that and we are as much Bangladeshis as anyone else. They're not being made to feel like second-class citizens in any way. Okay. And I think one area which probably the interim government needs to look at is to publicize more information, more statistics to counter what is being perceived as Indian propaganda, unfortunately. So I think that would help.
My last question. As you mentioned yourself a moment ago, Foreign Secretary level talks between the Indian Foreign Secretary and the Bangladesh Foreign Secretary are scheduled for the 9th and 10th. That's literally in 3 days' time. How much of what you're saying to me, both in terms of your critique of the Indian narrative, your critique of the Indian media, but also your belief that Hindu religious leaders in Bangladesh themselves are critical of that narrative, how much of that will be communicated by your Foreign Secretary to our Foreign Secretary? How much of the messaging will be similar to what you've been saying to me?
I can only hope that this will be effectively communicated, and we can actually look forward to forging a relationship between India and Bangladesh and its people, as opposed to what is widely being viewed as India and a particular person or a political party. And if neither party has any other agenda, the outcome can only be positive. is
Has
how I'd
the
like to
presence
end.
of Sheikh Hasina in India, where she's been since the 5th of August, spoilt the relationship? Has it sowed seeds of suspicion in the minds of Bangladeshi people and perhaps in the minds of the interim government in particular? Is her presence the canker?
Her presence has not helped at all. If I were to be honest, her presence has not helped at all, but that may, the concerns in the minds of the Bangladeshi people and the interim government with regard to her presence, and also not just her presence, but also the relationship that she shared with the Indian government for the last 15 years. So all of this has raised many questions in our minds, but I think that it's nothing that cannot be sorted through concerted diplomatic channels, which has not been explored earlier. I mean, we were expecting that India will reach out to forge its relationship with the new government, with more importantly, the people of Bangladesh after ouster of Sheikh Hasina. But unfortunately, that has not been forthcoming. I mean, we've only faced criticism from the Indian media and a wave of misinformation.
Rashna Imam, let's leave it there. I thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. I thank you for putting the Bangladesh point of view across so eloquently. I hope an Indian audience in large numbers is listening to you, and I hope they realize that the whole story as viewed in India is very different to the way the same story is viewed in Bangladesh. It's important for us to see things from your point of view as well. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan, for giving me this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.